in thinking about it, I think what's important is we all have experiences. Mark was kind enough to come over and coach me a little bit a couple weeks ago about what it is that you guys are interested in hearing from people who are doing this work with you. The stories, the challenges you face, and the things you've overcome. So I'll try to do that. I think at the end of the day, for this to be worth your time, is for you to walk away maybe having learned a little something, so that you might be able to use as you build your businesses and face the challenges that you face. So Bill, who am I? Where did I come from? What did I do? I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. My family's from Ohio. I grew up in a pretty typical upper middle class family in Philadelphia. My father was an engineer. My mother was a housewife. My dad fought in the Philippines in World War II. He went to military school, straight into the war, and then went back to the University of Cincinnati. He was a chemical and civil engineer, and then he went to Carnegie Mellon for graduate school, and then right into a job with a subsidiary of Air Products, headquartered in Philadelphia, and he spent 35 years working for the same company. I had one sister. I grew up as a student athlete. I was a pretty good athlete in high school. I'd matriculated to golf as a passion and a sport. I was a pretty good junior player, and I played in high school for a team that won the New Jersey State Championship, which isn't saying a lot because you only play about 4 months a year, 9 holes, because the weather sucks. When it was time, and I was a good student, and I was a good math and science student because that's all I knew. Engineering was what I understood. So when it came time for me to think about going to college, I knew that there were 2 things that I was passionate about: getting out of the Northeast to warm weather, and going to a school where I could get an engineering degree and I could play collegiate golf. That was what was important for me. So I'm going to age myself. There was obviously no internet. There was we didn't do college visits. There was a book that you bought about that thick and about that big, and you just went through the catalog looking for colleges. So I had 2 choices. Princeton, which was close to where I lived, and way too close to my mother, and I ended up at Tulane. So I started in college at Tulane in 1969. For those of you who are a little younger than I am, which is everybody in the room, that was a great time to go to college. There were things that were occurring socially that were unique. And when people ask me where I grew up, I say New Orleans. The previous 18 years could not possibly have prepared me for New Orleans. Kid coming out of Philadelphia, New Jersey. Drinking age in New Orleans was 18. Actually, it's a height thing, because when your nose gets to the bar, you're old enough to drink in New Orleans. So I went there, engineering student, clean-cut kid, played golf. First 3 weeks, I spent my first semester of funds. And my dad had to make an emergency trip while on a business trip to New Orleans to replenish my bank account, because I was discovering what $4 drinks in 1969 got you, which was drunk and headachy. But it was wild. It was great education, great place to culturally. I developed an incredible love for New Orleans. I was there to play golf and to be an engineer. The thing about me is my brain's too busy for golf. Even though I play today and I'm a good player, from a competitive standpoint, my brain is way too busy. I got way too much going on to really be a good competitive golfer. Just anecdotally, my youngest son is a really good player, and when he was a high-quality junior player, we went to a golf psychology school where they put machines on you to manage stress, to see whether you can manage stress when you're competing. And there was 2 high school kids and 2 college kids and me, and I was in my 50s at the time, and I broke the stress machines. My son barely moved, so we figured that's probably the end of my competitive career. So my brain was way too busy for golf. When I discovered in engineering school, my brain was way not busy enough. It was way over my head. My first semester I had physics, calculus, chemistry, engineering design, which back in those days was a silly-ass slide rules that carried on, people carried on their belts. And I had an English course. And I pretty immediately figured out when I got involved in all this my first semester in college that, wait a minute, I was doing all that between 8 and 11:30 because I had to leave for the golf course at 11:30. And I was coming back at dark, and then I was studying until midnight. A bunch of stuff that really wasn't very interesting to me that I was a little overwhelmed by, and I did it again every day. So for those of you who've played college sports, it's not that glamorous. It's hard work. When you add that to an engineering curriculum, it was too hard for me. So I had decisions to make and then I joined a fraternity, of course, which you shouldn't do when you're a student athlete. And I saw some girls that I liked, which you probably shouldn't do when you're a student athlete in engineering and fraternity. But all in all, it was a little overwhelming for me. So I was really saved my freshman year by everything that happened in 1970 with sort of the student marches on Washington and the wars and politics, because my last semester, my freshman year, our finals were canceled. Probably is one of the reasons why I'm here today, because I was able to revert back to grades that I probably wouldn't have achieved. So where did I go from there? I went into English literature. I became an English major. I was inspired. If you look at your life, which this little exercise has helped me do, you look for people who have inspired you. So the first person who inspired me was my dad. Unfortunately, he died when I was young, relatively young, in 35. He lived hard and worked hard and played hard and liked his gin and his cigarettes, and at the end of the day, that's probably not a good mix. But he was my first inspiration and my role model for work ethic and being a parent and a husband. But I had an English professor my freshman year in college who sort of turned a switch for me, and I discovered a love of learning and a love of reading and a ability to write and articulate my thoughts that I didn't really know existed. So in life, there's that handful of people. One was my English professor. So I became an English major, which also allowed me to, after I stopped playing golf and dropped out of engineering school, it also allowed me to go junior year abroad. And Tulane has a fabulous junior year abroad program, and many of you and your kids probably have done semester abroad. We always encourage our kids to be, but I actually spent a year in Wales, at the University College of Wales, in a program that was next to Oxford, the #2 ranked English literature program in the United Kingdom. And I spent the entire year immersed in English literature and philosophy. That and the experience of living overseas, there were 3 Americans in a student body of 3,000. We all played on the basketball team. Says something about the Welsh basketball capability. And I learned the intimacy of the world. I traveled the world. I was there for a year, and I went to school for 8 months. And the other 4 months, I was all over the place as far as Greece. But I just learned the intimacy of the world, how connected we are, and it really served me and has served me for my career because I have been comfortable working in any part of the world with any culture in different languages, and it's all sourced in that. And when I came home and told my dad, I was so excited, or didn't come home, I wrote him and talked, and I said, I'm going junior year abroad, of course, and I'm going to Wales. And he said, Wales? If I wanted to send you to a coal mining country, I'd send you to Pittsburgh. But it was a great experience. While I was there, I was the junior in college, I was facing what's my future. So my future was with a lottery number. Those of you who know about the draft lottery, my number was 100, which was not a good number. The Vietnam War was raging. Not many people were in support of it. My father was a military guy, as I said, and he didn't want his only son going to Vietnam. And he was very conservative, very, loved this country, but that war was crazy. It was crazy. So when I was sort of looking at life, here's how I made a decision to go to law school. I really wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a journalist. So I researched journalism schools, and one I wanted to go to was Northwestern, and it was a one-year program. So then I thought, well, that's not long enough, because there was no visibility to the end of the war. So I looked at business schools, and business schools were 2 years. So that's not long enough. So I decided, well, I might as well just go to law school. So that's 3 years. So as it turned out, so by the way, I didn't know what lawyers did. There were no lawyers in my family. I'd never met a lawyer. But all I knew is it was 3 years. And it was a good, people said, if you're an English major, it's a good path. So I went to law school. I went to Tulane. Had a great experience. Learned a lot. Learned how to think differently. I tell people all the time, a law degree does not necessarily mean you should go be a lawyer, but it teaches you how to think differently. Teaches you how to think critically. And it really actually ties to some of the tools that we've learned to use in our business about basing how you think on facts. Facts first. So it was the beginning of my sort of development as a thinker differently than I had, in the previous 21 years of my life. So it was sort of the first real exploration of being critical in how you think and how you communicate and how you write. And it was, so law school for me was a great experience, but I still had no clue what lawyers did and how I was going to turn this into a life, because again, all I knew was engineering. So I ended up coming to Houston. So how did I get to Houston? My second year in law school, you go through this process of on-campus interviews. The law firms come and you go to these little 20-minute snippets, sound bites, and everybody says the same thing and you answer the same questions the same way. And if you're lucky, you connect with somebody and you get an offer to go spend part of the summer with a firm. And for me, it was more than that. It was almost serendipitous. It was almost destiny. It was almost like this guy got planted in my life. So I was going to work for the largest firm in New Orleans, but I had no aspiration of living in New Orleans for the long term. I didn't want to go back to the north. I'd learned to love the hot, humid, muggy weather of the South, and it was good for my complexion, keeps me young. So I was in an interview, and there was a firm that many of you probably know today, Chamberlain Hurlica here in Houston. At the time, it was smaller than the size of our firm now, and the name of the firm was Chamberlain Hurlica White and Waters. I had one of those 20-minute interviews that I was the last guy on the list. A guy by the name of Bob Waters came to interview, and our 20-minute interview lasted 2 hours and 15 minutes. It was just one of those things. It was really magical. He's still alive, so he's still the same number of years old. He's 15 years older than me. He was, or 17, and he's 17 years older than me. He was a named partner in the firm. He was from Alabama. He played high school golf. He's a sports nut. And we just connected. So they offered me a job to come here. I came here for the summer between my second and third year in law school. My first experience of walking into a law firm, let alone working for one. The process went well. I fell in love with, sort of began my love affair with the city of Houston. I got an offer and accepted it before I went back from my third year in in law school. So my third year in law school was really fun, really fun. And my performance wasn't all that good, but they didn't ask. So that's how I ended up in Houston. I knew one person. Last year I was honored by the Center for Houston's Future, and I said, you know, for a guy who came here, and I knew one person 36 years ago, to actually get a leadership award was unbelievable to me. But and Houston's changed a lot, but it hasn't. It's still, what I tell people is, there is no place in the world that I could have achieved what I've achieved in this business other than Houston, Texas. So I have a deep love affair for Houston. So I'll give you a little, and sort of why, so what happened to me. So I went to work at Chamberlain Herlica for Bob Waters. That's why I came here. I'm a corporate lawyer. We corporate real estate, finance. That's what he did. It was a tax firm, but I did the other stuff. 2.5 years into this, what I thought was, back then when you went to work at a law firm, it was for life. You went to work for the firm. You worked there till they put you in a boneyard, in a corner, and and they feed you under the door. They give you a secretary and a couple $1,000,000, and that's it. That's what you did. And if you moved twice in your career, something was wrong with you. So today, the kids coming into the business today move twice in 5 years or 6 years. And they might, what's a statistic that 30-year-olds coming out of school have 5 jobs? So it's just a different world. But when I went to work for Chamberlain Herlica, and for Bob particularly, I thought that was my life. I said, I'm done. Beautiful brand new offices at 1100 Milam. I watched where there was a hospital across the street, which is now the Pink Tower. And I used to look out my window as the hospital got destroyed and this tower came up, and I was so fascinated by that. So being part of this sort of the growth and redevelopment of Houston. 2.5 years into my tenure there, Bob walked in my office one day and said, I'm leaving the firm to become a partner in the group that's going to develop the Houstonian. So he partnered with Tom Faccio and Roger Ramsey to be part of the Houstonian Development Company, which developed the Houstonian. Well, I had been working on that project, and one of the most fun things I did in my career, I worked on every aspect of that project, from the very first land assembly to the development of the fitness center and the hotel and the condos. But Bob leaving was like, wow. And he invited me to sort of come with him and start a little law firm. And then Hank Chamberlain at the time, at that time we had non-competes in our business. So Hank said, look, I'm okay with you going to work for the Houstonian, but I'm not okay with you taking people and starting a law firm, because that looks like a split up versus one of our senior guys going to work for a client. So I got left behind for a year. And at the end of a year, I'd gotten divorced from my first wife, and I wasn't very happy, although I was working for George Herlica, who's a brilliant, wonderful guy. But I missed Bob, and I missed the excitement of having my mentor right there and my good friend. And so a year later, he invited me to leave and join, and we started a law firm called Waters, Townsend, and Boyar. And so here I was, 29 years old. I'm a partner law firm, which is crazy. And I show up, and I realize that Waters is really being a developer, and Townsend's reading the Wall Street Journal. and there's me, and I'm 29 years old, and nobody's producing any revenue. Holy crap. Holy crap. And I'd left the security of a downtown, 28th floor downtown, nice job, benefits. So that was the real start for me of my journey as a law firm owner, leader, manager. There was a process for that firm. And what I call it is doing it wrong. So we started with 3 of us that became 6. And you know, it was like the 80s were the crazy 80s. How many of you were alive in business in the 80s? Anybody? How many of you besides Susie? We probably met in the 80s. Late 80s. Early 80s? Oh, geez. So I attribute this decade to my life lessons in business. So when I was talking to Mark, and he said, okay, so you've done a lot of things right. Tell us what you did wrong. Most of it occurred in this 10 years. So I started building a firm, and I brought some guys in. So I was a real estate corporate guy. I had a tax guy. I brought in a litigator, a bankruptcy lawyer, a securities lawyer. And in 1982, I made my first really bad decision, which is I brought a bunch of people in, and I gave up control. Gave up control. So I was the big producer. I was really in charge. But to get these guys in, a couple of them were older than me, and I didn't know anything about business. I really didn't. I didn't know what makes business work versus not. So this is a classic sort of trial by fire. So here's what I say I did wrong. Other than this, I did it all right. I had the wrong people. The firm had no soul. And what it was about money. So we built a 40-person law firm. We built a firm that from the outside was thought to be the up-and-coming, driven, entrepreneurial, great young guys. And on the inside, we were really hollow. It's like those friends that you had, that their marriage looked great, they always looked happy, and then next thing you know, they just got divorced, right? And that's what our deal was. The outside, it all looked great. On the inside, the first 5 years, it was a challenge, it was exciting. In the last 5 years, I was miserable every day. And I didn't really know why until I discovered the other side of life, which is how to do it right. But personally, I did a lot of things wrong. Back in those days, it was considered normal for lawyers to invest with their clients, to promote clients to do deals with clients. Conflicts of interest were fuzzy. Being a lawyer today and a developer tomorrow and an investor in somebody else's deal the next day was all part of how we did business. And that works really well in good times. But when we had our meltdown, it all sort of crumbled, and I made some really big mistakes. I signed some big personal guarantees on deals to get tax benefits because tax rates were 50 to 60%. I promoted people into deals, and I didn't understand whether the deals were good or not because I didn't have the kind of depth of education understanding then that I have today, and it all sort of crumbled. My clients got in trouble because of the economy. I spent 6 or 7 years doing workouts, and then I had my own personal workout where I had to sort of settle up and take care of lots of people over lots of things and try not to get sued for malpractice and conflicts of interest. And it really shaped how I think and feel about our industry, and it really shaped Boyar Miller. It was difficult. There were actually 3 wonderful things that came out of the 80s. I met and married my wife of now 33 years, Pam. and I had 2 great kids. That sort of offset all this other stuff that was going on, the breakdown. And our firm was built on how big can we get, how much money can we make. And that's when I learned that when you have growth and making money as a strategy, you're doomed to fail. Because you will make decisions that will drive growth that will oftentimes be the wrong ones. It's how you measure your success. And I learned that in our business, you don't measure success by how many lawyers you have and how big your bank account is, because you're going to leave some things in the wake. So that's where I really began. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't really know about values as it relates to business. I had my own personal values tested because of the mistakes that I made and the financial pain that I experienced, but I knew that it wasn't right. I knew what we were doing wasn't right. It was one of those, I felt it, but I didn't know how to talk about it. All I knew is that if I ever had a chance to do it again, that it wouldn't be about how big we were or how much money I made. And those would be the results of doing something else and doing something else really, really well. So I got a chance because one day I decided I'd had enough. I went to my partners and I said, you know, we're 40 lawyers. We got a floor and a half in what is now Amity Bank. We should be 20. We have a whole bunch of, we were very horizontal. We had one of everything, and we had a core group of litigators, core group of real estate lawyers, and a core group of corporate lawyers who were really good, and the rest were not. And my partner said, no, we want to be 100. You know, we're going to measure our value to this community and being 100. And 100 lawyers in 1980 terms is 250 today, so to put it in perspective. So I walked in, told my wife, I actually was in New York, I used to travel a lot, came in from New York, met her at a party. On the plane, I thought, you know, I'm done. I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to go. I knew I had a big book of business and some lawyers who would travel with me and a secretary who was loyal. And so I met my wife at a party over at Churrasco's, and I said, I'm resigning tomorrow. And, you know, after she sort of picked herself up, she said, okay. Whatever, I believe in you. So I walked in the next day and said, I resign, I'm done. And I said, I want 90 days. I won't announce anything, I want 90 days to sort it out because I've not talked to a soul. Most people in our business get it all sorted out, have an office and business cards and a phone, and they walk in, they say, oh, I'm leaving. And you go on the internet and you can find they got a new web page up, you know, I mean, it's all done. And I didn't do that. And I think that was one of the places where the beginning of the values that we have at Boyar Miller sort of began to surface, which was highest integrity in all dealings, which is I didn't think that I could, with integrity, talk to anybody else in the community, that the right first step was to let my partners know that I was going to leave. So their reaction was lovely. Because I had to get on a plane and go to Dallas that day. Their reaction was lovely because they got together and decided to fire me. And they made up some reasons why I'd done all these terrible things, and so they fired me. They gave me 30 days to relocate, and the time I came back from Dallas, they were scraping the gold letters on our door off with my name on it. So it was a real lesson for me because it all worked out. And I interviewed a dozen places. I had a very nice book of business and a good reputation in this community for doing good work and being a leader. And you know, I thought I was going to go tuck into a big law firm for 5 years, take my practice, make some money, not be involved in leadership and management, and just go practice law for a while. And then I was introduced by a mutual friend to Gary Miller. actually a client of mine who he grew up with in Waco. And Gary and Leonard Simon had a little firm doing bankruptcy and corporate work, and they decided they were looking for a lead partner who had real estate experience. So I met with Gary and I met with Leonard, and I sort of got excited about that. They had 7 lawyers. I was going to bring 3. And I'd go to interviews with all these big firms, and my model was I thought I would join up with an out-of-town firm. So I interviewed with Weil Gotshal and some of these other big firms you've heard about, where I could bring a good Houston presence, a 7-figure book of business, and some local connections, and really help them build a local platform. My wife, God bless her, every time I came home from one of those interviews, she said she could see the stress, the notion of me sitting in an office and having to keep my mouth shut and not weigh in on management and leadership issues. And then when I came home from meeting with Gary and with Leonard, I was excited, I was exhilarated. They were basically, they had some bones there, but they needed help in really setting the direction of the firm, and sort of, they basically said, you got a blank black whiteboard over there. Take it. So it was really Pam who encouraged me, and 2 clients who said, we're with you no matter what, whatever you need, even, and they can't invest in law firms, but if there's any financial support we can provide, we'll do it. So I started what was then called Boyar, Simon & Miller in 1990. It was a watershed moment for me in my life, and the last 23 years have been a remarkable journey, and we call this the ultimate mulligan for those of you who play golf. I say I've had 2 incredible mulligans in my life, and I feel amazingly blessed. One of them is my wife. Something about me, I can't do anything right the first time, but I got my second marriage, my trophy wife, I've been married to for 32 years now, and of course the firm. And we talk about there's a wrong way and a right way to do things in building business and entrepreneurship. And as Chris said, I consider myself a businessman first. I've spent my career building organizations and working with clients, building organizations, and entrepreneurship is sort of near and dear to me. So what we've done is we've built something that we say is purpose-driven, it's values-based, and it's business first. And we all need inspiration. And if I look back, which this has caused me to do, so what inspired me once I grew up? So in 1990, I was 39 years old, and I was starting over. Financially, I'd basically spent everything I made as a successful lawyer in bad real estate and restaurant deals. So I can evaluate them very well now. For those of you, and anybody here who wants to invest in a restaurant deal, come talk to me. So I was at 39, I was with 2 little kids. I was really starting over financially and in business. Because I left my previous firm with nothing. I basically dropped off the keys, gave them the firm. I had a car which they wanted to take back from me, not sell to me, so I dropped that off at the front gate and handed them the keys to that too. It was a very, very unfriendly, ugly break. But I got a lot of inspiration, and so if I look back at sort of where did I get inspired? First of all, I had a client called Dulce International, which is a global hospitality company that I started for Andy Dulce, filing a charter as a young lawyer down the hall from the Houstonian. He was the original operator of the Houstonian Hotel, but he started his little company as a consulting company. Fast forward, it became an $800 million global company with 30 hotels in 9 countries on 2 continents. I was on that journey the whole way, and I was vice chairman of the company for about 10 years, on the board for 15. We had institutional capital invested by AEW and one of Soros's companies, We bought and sold probably 50 hotels worldwide, and I traveled the world. I was basically head of acquisition development as the lawyer from the outside and vice chairman. One of the things that we did as a company is we managed GE's training facility in Crotonville, New York. So as a board member of Dulce, we got to participate in all of Jack Welch's stuff. We got, and some of the stuff we learned, so in addition to that, I was on boards of public companies and private companies, and I was fascinated by organizational development and what makes companies work and what doesn't work. So some of the things that I got trained in was Six Sigma, which is basically just how do you rip defects and inefficiencies out of systems. And my partners thought I was nuts because I made them sit through a whole Saturday of Six Sigma training. But you know what we did? We took 17 days out of our billing cycle. We went from 21 days to 4 by going through a Six Sigma process. And out of that training, what we do is we're constantly looking at efficiency. How do we rip inefficiency out of our system? Because inefficiency is waste, and waste loses money. Change acceleration. I love change. Chris and Matt will tell you that even when we don't need it, we'll make it happen because it gets people stirred up, and people stirred up are more energized, and they're more active, and they're more productive. So I think it's the biggest challenge for leaders is managing change. So I learned through participating at Crotonville some change acceleration tools and techniques and things that helped us manage change in a very dynamic industry. Our industry is very, very susceptible to change, and you read about it. And there's an article in the Wall Street Journal today that in the face of all this job growth around the country, the big law firms are laying off people left and right. So it's sort of counterintuitive. So I learned about how leaders affect change. And then the last thing is Good to Great, which I think is the best business book ever written. I became a voracious reader of business books because I traveled internationally and back and forth to New York probably twice a month. So I had a lot of time sitting on airplanes, and I'm not a talker to the guy in the next seat. So I faced down, and I've probably read every business book that's been written until probably the last 3 or 4 years. This is the best one, and we've adopted. There's some incredible tools in Good to Great. You know, I think Collins is brilliant, and the stuff that he comes up with is so applicable to everybody's business. The hedgehog concept: do what you're passionate about, do what you're best at, and understand that single economic driver that drives success. So we've taken that, we've applied it to the law firm. It's part of our mantra. It's part of what we discuss at our meetings. We, having the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seat on the bus. We just went through a very difficult restructuring. That we had a 15-year employee, a 9-year employee that were riffed because of a change in the structure that was driven by our conversation about having the right people on the bus and the right seat on the bus. Tough. Expensive in a lot of ways, but critical, and it's contributed enormously to what's become a record year for us. Having disciplined people with disciplined thought and disciplined action, and we challenge our people to be disciplined, to be focused. So I've just found tremendous inspiration from Collins's books, and particularly Good to Great, and it's evolved to my own sort of philosophy. So I guess one of the things after you get past 60, and 60th birthday is a brutal birthday because everybody has you thinking back, And I thought I was precocious till I was 59 years old, but so I'm 62, and so I've developed my own philosophy, and so all these experiences and the winning and the losing. So I look at life as 3 circles: purpose, method, and outcome. And the there's a lot of buzzwords that you all hear about, read about, see about. There's mission and vision and values and this and that and that. So here's where it fits. Purpose is passion. Purpose is mission. Purpose is why. It all starts with purpose. Getting out of bed in the morning. What do I love to do? And entrepreneurs particularly, we typically do what we love, or else we go do something else. Outcome is vision. It's destination. It's the result. It's what we're building toward. I tell people all the time, if you don't have outcome, it's like getting in your car in the morning and driving out of your driveway without knowing where you're going. And you can keep making right turns and you go in a circle, and if you make a left turn, you get off course and you get lost, absent a plan to get to an outcome. So even when we go to our office, we have an outcome, which is to get there. And how we get there is through method, which is what we do and how we do it. And in method is where values or culture reside, and strategy and tactics and action. So that's where, so when you look at, that's the world. We have purpose, we have a place we're trying to get to, a destination, a destiny, a vision, and then we have in the middle the stuff that connects those two. Most people think in method. They think in action, disconnected from purpose and outcome. So this is sort of how I've learned to think. And this is in all aspects of life, but particularly in your business. And that's when you get people to, where the buzzwords fit. So the words don't matter. Where they fit in these circles matter, and the connectedness of those circles. So here's some other tools that we've developed in our practice through friends, and some of you sat in a forum where Chris talked about some of this. We talk about the cycle of value and the cycle of waste. Cycle of value is we act, we align about something, we act, we work together to adjust, and we create value. And there's more alignment. And we act, we evaluate that, we adjust, and we create more alignment. That's compared to what we call the cycle of waste, which we live in all the time, which is we disagree, and when there's disagreement, people get defensive, and when people get defensive, it destroys relationships. So then you disagree some more. This is me in 1985 to 1990. A lot of disagreement, a lot of defend, a lot of protecting turf, destroyed relationships. It's waste. So some of this stuff I could talk about for an hour. I mean, we do 2 days of training in some of these things, but these are tools that we've adopted in our firm that allow us to run an efficient and effective business. And then the most effective tool, my best friend from college has a world-class consulting practice in Boulder called Conversant, works with Fortune 100 companies all over the world. He developed what's called the conversation meter. Conversation meter tests conversation and the creation of value. So 0 to 100, with 100 being valuable, 0 being waste. This is how people interact and how they communicate. First quartile is pretense. Low end of pretense, lying. High end of pretense, withholding. Can't create value in your organization, in your marriage, with your kids, if somebody's lying or withholding. There's no possible way to create value. The next quartile is sincerity, which is opinion. This is where most people reside. They have an opinion, and then they search for the facts to support their opinion. That's what Matt and Chris do for a living. They're trial lawyers. They have an outcome they're trying to achieve, a position, then they search for the facts. But that's difficult to create value when you're basically, and at the low end of opinion, it's opinion absolutely unsupported by fact. At the high end of opinion, it's shopping for facts to support your point of view. And this is where most people communicate. They start with their opinions about things. Do you ever talk about politics? Anybody here ever talk about politics? Okay. Next time you're in a political conversation, ask somebody, what has you say that? What has occurred that has you say that? That's the question that gets somebody from opinion to facts. Accuracy is facts first, opinion second. What are the facts? And based on those facts, what's a logic? What's an opinion? What's the conclusion that we can make together? Facts are things that you and I agree on. This is black. Agree? Fact. If he thinks it's red, we got a problem. Somebody's right or wrong, but it's not a fact. And then the last one is authenticity. And authenticity is really demonstrated by this model, which is called the intersection model, which is the facts, my view of the facts, and my view of your view of the facts. My taking into consideration your point of view. This is the highest form of communication. This is where value is created. This is what we all should aspire to. This is where you feel respected and honored and included. Whole conversation about partnerships or boards or management teams, taking into account my views. So I'm sharing this with you because this is central to the culture that we've created at Boyar Miller. And authentic communication is part of one of our values where we're committed to an environment of mutual respect, support, and authentic communication. And authentic communication is represented by this intersection model. So we base our business on facts first. Then our view of that and a respect for others' views. It's not quite a democracy. That's different. I don't believe in democracy in professional service organizations. I don't believe in committees. I believe in strong leadership. But taking into account each other's points of view is critical to creating value. So, what have I learned? These are the three critical things that I've learned in my career. They should be takeaways for you. Culture first. It's not about size. It's not about making money. It's not how many widgets you sell or how many people you employ. It's about the quality of environment that you create. It's about the people that you employ. It's about your purpose. These are in no order. These are sort of random order, but it's about purpose. You know, Daniel Pink in his book Drive says that people today want three things. They want purpose, they want autonomy, and they want to master something. So the generation that we're hiring is that generation. They want purpose. There's nothing in there about how much money they make. Everybody wants to make money. There's nothing in there about how big the organization gets. It's all about meaning. And I believe that. I believe that. What we've discovered is in 27 lawyer environment, we can have more purpose, more value, more fun, better culture, and compete economically with the biggest firms in the world. And then it's about leadership. And it's about two different kinds of leadership. It's about servant leadership, and it's about courageous leadership. One of my, and I'm sorry he had to leave for a meeting, but one of the true gifts to me was when Chris joined the firm. And I could ultimately over time, and I'll talk about this succession process we went through in a minute because I think it could be valuable for some of you, which is I got visibility to the possibility that I wouldn't have to run this firm forever. And I came to grips with, should I even run the firm forever? I ran it for 20 years. But I had to teach the kind of leadership that works in this world today. And it's not the autocratic leadership. It's not dictatorial leadership. I used to say that I was a benevolent dictator, and that was true for probably the first 15 years that I ran the firm because that's what we needed. But over the last 5 to 7 years, I hope Matt would say that it's shifted into much more servant leadership, much more of a inclusive leadership. So I think teaching people, and there's humility in that. There's an understanding that there's wisdom of crowds. One of the great books I've ever read, by the way. wisdom of crowds. There's an understanding that you might not know everything, and it's probably pretty likely that you don't, that other people from other life experiences and other perspectives and other cultures may have a different view of something that could be valuable to you. It took me a long time to accept that possibility. And then courageous leadership is the ability and willingness to make hard decisions fast. That's the toughest thing for young leaders to come to grips with, which is what are the decisions that need to be made, and how do I make them, and what's the implication? And those who delay stumble. So we've had to come to grips with that. And some of the worst leadership examples of my career were my inability or unwillingness to move people out who needed to be moved out. And the breakthrough, so we're not so slow anymore. But I made some terrible mistakes early on in this firm by not moving people out when all the indications were they needed to go. Y'all ever seen the Jack Welch grid of how you evaluate people in quadrants? Job, cultural activity and job performance. And let me do it this way. So here's job performance. Here's cultural adaptivity. And so if you're low culture, low performance, you're a loser, you need to go. And if you're high performance, high culture, you're a star and you need to stay. So what do you do with the high performer who's not with the program, or the low performer who's with the program? And what Jack says, which was sort of proven to be true for us, is the upper left quadrant, the high performer, low culture, is cancer. And that person needs to go. So in our business, we've had those. Highly productive, big practices, hard workers, bring a lot of money, but just not with the program, don't live the culture. And when you're slow to move those people out of your organization, they can infect the stars. They can bring them, there's a pull that you have to, and it's one of the great leadership lessons of my life, is if you don't put a big barricade, a big wall between the cancers and the stars, you can infect your entire organization. And those lower right quadrant, which is their performance is low, but it's hard to find people who will live and embrace your culture. That's where you invest. If they're up towards the acceptable performance, but somebody who, obviously down on the bottom, who can't do the job, that's what we face this year. No matter how much they're with the program, if they can't do the job you need done to drive your organization forward, they got to go. So we've learned a lot about leadership, and what I'd say is one of the things I'm most proud of in this firm is about 5 or 6 years ago, we got together, all the lawyers in the firm, on an off-site, and we did a SWOT. And we decided from that one of the primary things we needed to focus on was succession. People were very concerned. I was 57 at the time. What was going to happen with me? And I kept telling people I have no ambition to retire. I told Susie that a few minutes ago. I'm not going to die at my desk because I don't hope to be there very much, but I love what I do, and I'm continue to do it. But we did conclude, and I was the driver in this, that nobody should be 60 years old running a firm like ours. You should be in their 40s. So we did a formal succession program. We did a self-selection where 3 of my partners said, I want your job. We spent a year going from 3 to 1 through a process of study and conversation that I led. Selected Chris as the successor with unanimous support from my partners. He spent 2 years as vice chairman of the firm with a transition of responsibility. And 3 years ago, this coming January 1st, he became chairman and I became nothing. We spent 6 months trying to figure out a title for me. There was no title that I could take that didn't suggest that I was still running the show. The transition was tough, but the ultimate transition was accountability on top of responsibility. The only way we could do that is I had to disappear. So I spent the first 6 months of 2011 outside of the office. I tried to work very early in January of 2011 in my home office. I have French doors to my home office. And I was sitting there in my Nikes and drinking my coffee and on the phone. My French doors closed. 3 times an hour, my wife came in. And I said, okay, here's the deal. You're either trying to tell me you don't want me here or drive me nuts. So I stopped doing that, but I spent a lot of time at Starbucks and, you know, Houstonian in the lobby, working from there, and over a 6-month period to let Chris get his legs and to communicate internally to the team that, yes, in fact, he was the chairman and I was not. We had some, there were some decisions made in 2011 that I knew were not good ones, but they weren't going to be terminal. So I let the decisions get made so that we could learn from them and he could learn from them. 2012, we fixed all that. I think he embraced the notion that I could be useful as a mentor and provide guidance. I think my partners began to let go a little bit in terms of their expectations. And even Gary Miller, who I've been partners now with 23 years, this year finally decided it was okay that I played a little bit more golf. So the transition of leadership has been fabulous. And what it's done for me personally is it's freed me up to say yes to all the things for 30 plus years I said no to. So I play a lot of golf and I go on a lot of trips, and I joined a golf club in Scotland and I go for a month a year to play in Scotland, and playing a lot of tournaments now that I didn't get to play in, and I have a son living in Panama. We get to see him, and so we've got a place in Austin. We go spend the weekends. It's been really wonderful, and firm's on pace for a record year, and this will be my third record, personally, my third record year in a row of production and productivity, and working all over the world, having a ball. So it's been fantastic, and people say, I can't believe you did that. I mean, that's your deal. And I said, I can't believe I didn't do it sooner. And what it does is it opens the place for a lot of different perspectives and different points of view. Chris is doing stuff differently than I did. He's making different decisions. And I knew that we had ultimately made it all the way to the finish line of transition because we hired a lawyer. I didn't even know we were looking for a lawyer, let alone that we were looking for a lawyer and I didn't meet the person. I didn't even know we were looking. So that was breakthrough. So it's that part's been great, and he's doing a great job. And as a result, you know, I have something to be really proud of. I look at people say, "What's your legacy?" Which is a weird thing to talk about somebody who's working full time. I don't really think about legacy. I never thought about it before this year, and so I have a couple that I'm very proud of. One is my kids. My kids are really smart and they're doing really great, and I think they're going to be productive members of society and net contributors. And one of them works for Jones Lang LaSalle in Panama. He's got 2 master's degrees from U of H and from Thunderbird, and he's a brilliant kid, doing great. And my youngest son's a UT graduate geology, and he's at Rice getting his MBA, and he's going to go drill for oil and gas. And so both my kids are awesome and good people, mostly because of their mother. But I'd like to think they learned some things from me. They're hard workers. They've got strong sense of ethics. They're spiritual people, and I think they're going to be really excellent contributors. And of course, Boyar Miller. And you know, Boyar Miller, we're building a model law firm, and we're serving the business community. That's what we do. That's the outcome for us. That's the outcome over here. That's the vision. And it doesn't matter if we're 22 lawyers or 27, and well, it doesn't really matter as long as we run an efficient business operation, how much money we make. You know, we all want to make a good living, but we have a culture that says that we're going to, you know, to develop our people to be great professionals. That takes investment. And, you know, we're going to have a culture of relentless dedication to service, which means it takes investment. So that's my story. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to tell it. And I hope you got something worthwhile out of it. So thanks.